Good morning. Thank you, Shailesh. Thanks to all the friends and Sahyadri for arranging this beautiful gathering. It's lovely to see so many people interested in Krishnamurti's teachings meeting physically after several years. Good to see many people whom we have met at other earlier gatherings of such kind or this kind. Krishnamurti's teachings is very evident from the topic of this gathering, main theme of this gathering. We are living in very difficult times. We are living in very crisis-ridden situations. And what does this man's teachings have to offer us as individuals, as people who listen to him? It's quite an interesting question. He lived till 1986 when he passed away. He traveled all over the world, spoke to audiences across geographies, and one finds that in his teachings there are very clear, interesting perceptions that he has to offer. Speaking under the umbrella of the teachings is never easy, because one feels that almost anything that has to be said has already been said by him. So one has quite a challenge in addressing any of the issues that he picks up and maybe speak on some of these topics. So at best what I say would be fragments of some aspects which I think are important from the teachings, some aspects which may be worthy of consideration. And of course, as it's very clear, we are not interpreters of the teachings. So there may be things that I may be saying which are not directly connected with the teachings, but may have some bearing. And I hope it throws light on your own journey, your own investigation, your own thinking, your own pondering over the big questions of life. So, we are living in very dangerous times. This is something that Krishnamurti said very early. And those years when I used to listen to him in Vasanta Vihar, I used to wonder, why is this man saying that we are living in dangerous times? It didn't look terribly dangerous to me, because around me there was not that kind of chaos, not that kind of destruction. So, was that so? It was just that probably I was not informed adequately, or there's also this illusion that something is happening far away. Already there have been 2 big wars in the last century, and yet we seem to somehow think that things are happening far away and they are not directly connected to us, that we are not somehow responsible, we are not somehow going to be affected by what's happening far, far, far away. There is some change in our perception now, the global, the local. We see conflict which is happening far away very quickly relate to us. Not only through newspapers which used to take a day to come, but now it's almost instant news being created all the time. And it's news that is getting created through the visual media, which is easily accessible on the many gadgets that we have in our hands or on big screens wherever we go. We find that there is a transmission happening of various events that are taking place around the world. It may be with regard to business and money, maybe with regard to war, maybe with regard to political developments that are taking place, and then there are interpretations that are going on all the time. So, we can't say we don't know anymore about what's happening. We can't say that we are unaware of things that are happening in different parts of the world. But yes, we are deluged with so much information that maybe our minds are sometimes not able to make sense out of all the things that are going on. There is a vast amount of information, particularly in the visual media, that is coming out again and again. Reading takes a little more time, a little more difficult, and one has to go into it a little more slowly to try and understand what the person is saying. But the visual media happens in a flash. And this has its own consequences, this has its own difficulties. Earlier, even now, for instance, when we read some news about some violence which takes place in different parts of the country, maybe in our own city, we are not immediately able to connect to it. We feel sad about what's happening. We feel that it's not good that some human being is killing somebody, or there's other kind of crime that's taking place, which is harming children, harming people who are defenseless. And this touches us. But we don't see anything further. We maybe sometimes feel, oh, I'm glad it's not happening near my home, not to my people, not to people who are in my family or who are in my community. So seems to be a little bit of a retreat of some kind, believing that we are somehow free of this. But we could easily ask also that this could happen to us, this could happen to anybody. That human being is not really separate from us, this could happen. There is tremendous amount of development that is taking place. There's the vast buildings, big infrastructure projects, roads, airports, trains, more and more comfort all over the place. Manufacturing facilities are being developed. Huge industrial complexes are being developed. We have large numbers of gated communities that are coming up. Nowadays they call them big projects. It's no longer just houses. And we, in the face of all this, there is seemingly a lot of improvement happening. But what we don't see also is there is destruction of environment. There is displacement of a large number of people that also happens simultaneously. That people are getting moved from one place to another place. Some of them without much choice. Some of them often without being adequately compensated. So on the one hand, the development moves in one direction. But on the other direction, there's also human suffering and suffering of other creatures that is also part of this whole process. And we may sometimes miss seeing this. There's another facet. This is the visible facet. There's a whole invisible dimension which is moving the world today. And that is the dimension of computing, computers, various kinds of information, programming that's taking place. Things are getting automated, things are getting done more easily. We find that we are able to reach and get services very easily. We are able to order things very easily. We are able to book tickets. All kinds of things are happening behind the scenes. And all this there's one more dimension which is emerging and which is emerging at a rapid pace. In fact, it has been under development for quite a while. Krishnamurti talked about this very early, almost 50 years ago. He said that machines are going to take over much of what we do. So he asked this question about what will man do when the machines take over all the work that you do. Interesting question. At the time when he asked this, probably many of us did not understand it at all. Certainly I can say this for one, I thought it was far away and not going to happen for many, many decades, maybe even a century. But today, it's out. Machines are rapidly moving to a position of intelligence where they say that some machines are going to be more than 1,000 times as intelligent as man. So they can do things far better because they learn. Machines have learned. Machines have been programmed to learn. And so this has its own impact. So on the one hand, many of the tedious, laborious jobs. Industrial Revolution used to do this, and the tedious jobs were handed over, they were mechanized and so that took place. So now a lot of the thinking, a lot of the arrangement, a lot of the conceptualization is also going to go into the machines. And I don't know if you and some of you read the news yesterday or day before, that the first CEO of an organization was fired by a AI empowered machine. The first CEO was fired, and a couple of days ago that was the news. So this is happening. This is happening, and this development is invisible. We are moving around, we have a look at what we are seeing, and there is something else parallelly happening. The destructive movements that are taking place, for instance, with wars. We read about what's happening in the Middle East. It's been going on for a long time. That beautiful booklet that Mr. Vishwanath spoke about, Sailesh was holding it up, Dr. Sailesh was holding it up in his hand. You have a look at that, and he talks about how the Jews and the Arabs been going on for 4,000 or 5,000 years, and this conflict is not ending. And Krishnamurti says the endless butchering has become a habit, an accepted formula in spite of all the religions. So poignantly, so clearly put. So we see missiles flying, people are saying there should not be killing of civilians, it's okay to kill people who are fighting, but you can't kill civilians, that's the distinction being made. But killing of people is acceptable when you have conflict. And Krishnamurti talks about the endless butchering. He uses very strong words. Now, I'm going to take the next step into what is all this doing to us? What is it doing to our mind? What's it doing to our consciousness? For instance, you see news about missiles flying, bombing some building or bombing some facility, either a big factory or some establishment, or raising it to the ground, dust rising. And we are seeing this every day, again and again, again and again, again and again. We also watch movies, action movies. You see the same thing in these movies, right? How does our mind make sense out of what we see? Is our mind able to see that the movie is separate from the news? That in news, actually there is somebody dying there, or some child getting maimed, or some hospital getting bombed. Do we know that? And when we are watching a movie, we say it's entertainment. Somebody has crafted the whole thing so that we have a certain experience when we see a movie. Does our mind, does our consciousness, does our body know this? And it's interesting to see that probably our body may not see the difference between these two. So we can't make out the difference between news and entertainment. We may not be able to make out. And what does our body do? Our body is programmed over the centuries to fight and flight. Our body is programmed in such a way. Programmed means it's not been programmed by us, it's been programmed over time. That when we have feelings, certain kinds of feelings produce certain kinds of chemicals. So the chemical responses are there. So the responses are there whether we are watching a movie or we are watching news. So what is the distinction between reality and that which has been given to us as somebody's creation is not very clear. So, as human beings, in our bodily responses, we are not able to understand. We are not able to understand the difference between. So, when we watch a movie and there is some violence there in the movie or whatever, and somehow we tell ourselves with our logic, this is only a film. And now when something else is going on, but the body doesn't understand this. The eyes see this, the experience of watching violence, the experience of reading about violence, the system undergoes a change. And the body is also programmed to heal itself. If there is a response, the body is a response to stress of events which are stressful. The body heals in its own way, the chemistry becomes normal in 12 to 36 hours. That is being discovered by science. The body's response comes down. And then till the next episode, again sends the chemistry into one flare. It just goes in various directions. So the interesting question that comes up is, I know that I'm watching a film, and I know that this is news about destruction. I know, right? Does this knowledge make any difference to us at all? Does that knowledge make any difference to the way the body responds or the way the connections that the mind makes? Does it make any difference? I'm taking very non-controversial example of violence. You can add it to many other things. You can add it to many other things. For instance, if I have a certain understanding that people of a certain religion or people from a certain country or a certain region, that they behave in a certain way. I have been told this in my family. I've read about this, and somehow or the other I'm convinced that this is so. Then what happens when I see a person from that community? What happens when I see some confusion? How does my body respond? How do my senses respond? What happens inside me? So this is about the inner chemistry and what happens there when we see what's going on around us. So this factor has implication right from our childhood and right through our life, that the body which is being programmed responds in a certain way, and whatever knowledge we have, whatever idea we have about what we should do, what we should not do, what is right, what is wrong, doesn't seem to have much of a role in the way the system responds. Now, as human society and all life on this planet has grown, we have multiple ways in which we have evolved. We have different color, we have different color of eyes, hair, stature, people from different geographies. And then they say that there's one little village in Kenya which produces the best long distance runners. We don't know why it happens, but it's happening there. And they eat very simple food. How does this happen? We don't know. So you have differences across the globe. And differences seem quite natural. That there is a difference between you and me. There's a difference between man and woman. Of course, that's getting more complicated these days. But when does difference become a division? When does difference become a division? Why do I think that because somebody is different from me, that I am separate from that human being and I have a division between that human being and me? Why do I say them, they, us? Why do I do this? So that's an interesting question, how difference can become coded as separation between people. Now, Krishnamurti, in that little booklet, makes a profound statement. I found it so beautiful. All propaganda is false. And we have lived on propaganda ranging from soap to God. All propaganda is false, and we have lived on propaganda ranging from soap to God. I think we all accept this. Second World War, there was propaganda, Goebbels was doing propaganda. Then this was picked up by Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, in America, and he found that propaganda was working very well, and advertisements and public relations came into existence. So, is it wrong to do propaganda? Krishnamurti says all propaganda is false. What would this mean? I think it might be a question really worth asking ourselves. So, I think I'm going to go into a couple of examples to decode this thing about propaganda and also about tradition. It's quite easy to say that all tradition may not be worthwhile, and we think that people should think for themselves and they should not just blindly follow anything that's been handed down. But let's just run this in slow motion a little bit with a couple of examples. Okay? So we have all gone to school. We have sat in classes before a teacher, blackboard. We have written exams. We have waited for the results with sometimes beating heart, sometimes with dry mouths. We have worn uniforms and received prizes for our performance, or our friends have received prizes for our performances, for either sports or for exams or for dance or some extracurricular activities. Now, having gone through all this experience, we feel really happy when we meet our friends. We move to college, do other pursuits. We carry memory of the schooling experience. And we look back and sometimes have some mixed results, but we think it will be a worthwhile experience largely. If someone were to ask us to design a school for the 21st century, we have 80 more years, or 75 years approximately of the 21st century left, right? So, how would we fall back on our experience and our memory? Would we retain all the elements that we have seen in our school? Without our awareness, we've been carrying a conviction about the structures. We think that a school must have all these things, all these elements, some of these elements. So we would put these elements back in there, because that's how it's coded in our understanding. And if we were designing a school for the 21st century, the remaining part of it, would we have uniforms? Would we have tables and chairs? Would we have blackboard or the substitute for the blackboard? What would we do? We might say that we are not following tradition. We might say that we are not merely following something that has been done, but we are wanting it to be acceptable. So we would design structure which would be measurable, which would be acceptable to people who are looking for schools. So we might end up falling back on very similar patterns from the past. So we may not consider this as following a tradition, but we might end up doing it. Tradition becomes practice, becomes conviction, becomes belief. Very easily. There's another interesting problem that tradition poses for us. We have a set of handed down practices, approaches, religions, and possibly beliefs. Okay? So I'm going to give an example. For example, for brushing our teeth, for cleaning our teeth first thing in the morning. I think today everybody uses, large numbers of people use brush and paste and plastic and everything else. Would we say we are following a tradition, or are we victims of propaganda? What would you say? Or is it that we actually understand why we are doing it and this is the best way of doing it? It's an interesting question. We have had, if you look back a little bit, you will find people have used all kinds of twigs or various kinds to brush their teeth. We have found that people have used various kinds of powders to massage the gums. In the traditional systems of medicine, they say massaging the gums, the interface between the tooth and the gum is what is very important. It is not so much just kind of getting the starch away from your teeth, products of decay from your teeth. Now, are we blindly following what is given to us? So here we come to the other level of question. You know, when something is said to us and a large number of people are following the same approach, then does it automatically become a form of propaganda, a form of tradition? And any question that is raised about it seems to be as if we are creating a problem or something else. So there is a very interesting anecdote from the life of Einstein. I have spoken about this many times and I found it quite fascinating. A journalist once asked Einstein, "What is the secret of your greatness?" So Einstein, it is said, asked her, "Tell me, what is 2 plus 2? And she said, "I'm told it's 4. But he said, "Yeah, I've also been told it's 4, but what do you think it is?" So she counted her fingers, and then counted them again and said, "I have been told it's 4, I also think it's 4. And Einstein said, "I am not sure it is 4 always." In a sense, he gave, in a nutshell, the theory of relativity. He explained it so beautifully to her, that 2 plus 2 doesn't always add up to 4. Now, is questioning that which seems self-evident, which seems obvious, which just because it's common practice, is that something that we do? Because Krishnamurti has given us almost a magic statement. He's offered us a magic antidote to becoming followers. He suggested that we should question everything. And questioning everything is pretty arduous because we have to look at doubt. We are not sure why we are doing something. We are not sure why something is taking place. And it means being watchful about what we are doing. But questioning is usually reserved for something that we don't agree with, that we don't find comfortable, that we think is a problem. We question things when we don't agree with it or it doesn't suit us. But do we question things that we accept? And I wonder if this is a very important part of the teachings. When Krishnamurti speaks about setting man unconditionally free, and also when he says you don't find truth through following anybody or through following a process, I think this is a magic mantra. Is it that he's in a sense brought this to our consciousness, saying, question everything, you must question everything, you find out. You may not know the answer, but at least find out for yourself. So, people may ask, when you question everything, they may say, are you living in constant disagreement with everything that's going on? Right? Is that how you want to lead your life, always in conflict? But questioning is to find out is very different from questioning. Questioning to understand is very different from questioning to put somebody else down, to counter an argument. Questioning is a movement of discovery. And lastly, I want to speak a little bit about perception, seeing. When we see something that we are doing or that something that's happening around us, and we notice that I'm functioning in a certain way, and suddenly it becomes apparent to me that a large number of people are also functioning this way. I think I'm different, I'm making my choices, I'm doing something. But in a moment, suddenly I see that my thinking is not really different from the thinking of other human beings. In that moment, I see that. Does it make any difference to the next moment? Does that seeing make any difference to the next moment? The minute I see this, I say, oh my God, I'm behaving exactly like everybody else. I feel ashamed, I feel guilty. And when Krishnamurti suggests that can we watch what's happening to us, can we watch anger like a flower, when he says, are we able to watch what's happening to us, this movement of trying to somehow take shelter, somehow to protect ourselves? And he also suggests that perception is action. That can one see clearly something and that has its own movement, that has its own action. That you don't have to convert that perception into some other form of action. When we see something, we have a flood of reactions based on our memory, based on our past, based on our experience, based on what we've been told. We have a flood of responses that come to us. And these responses are not just ours, it's a shared phenomenon. It's happening to everybody. So one of the most profound things that Krishnamurti has said is that we are the world and the world is us. I am the world, you are the world and the world is you. That I am no different from everybody else around me. That my consciousness is the same consciousness from which every other consciousness is functioning. Now, at every stage, we seem to want to separate ourselves from what's happening in the world. It's not that we are somewhere, I'm happy as saying, oh, I'm glad this is not happening to me, or I don't behave in this way. Oh, that person behaves like this, but I don't. No, we seem to want to kind of protect ourselves from seeing that our mind in its functioning is very similar to the minds of other people around us. And this perception, when we have, we don't know what to do with this perception. But I think Krishnamurti seems to suggest that if we are able to deeply perceive this, deeply see the fact that our way of thinking is not different from another person's way of thinking. How would I talk to you if I felt that your mind functions the same way as mine? Would I try to convince you of my point of view? Or would you try to convince me of your point of view? How would we talk to each other if we felt that your mind and my mind are the same? They are not very different. It's not one getting an advantage over the other, or one somehow or the other feeling that he or she has won an argument, a discussion, a process. How would we function with each other? So this is an interesting question. And is there a perception? There's further. I convert a perception into an idea, all very easily, all too easily. In the moment of realization, I see that my mind functions the same way as everybody's mind. Then I say yes. I make it into one sentence, one idea. Is there a way of perceiving something that's going on without converting it into an idea? This is something that I have attempted to understand, that when we perceive something, we have an attempt, our usual attempt is to extract some meaning from it, to extract a sentence from it, make a sutra out of it. And then I can transmit it, I can communicate it. But if I don't do all that, is there a way of perceiving what's happening to us without this movement of extraction, without this movement of interpretation, but just seeing it as it is? It seems to be something very refreshing that Krishnamurti suggests, and at its very heart, it has no division in it. It is not as if I am trying to get something out of whatever I have perceived. Fragmentation that begins inside me doesn't. The last point, the world over today, numbers have become extremely important. Religions, organizations, markets, all of them are looking for numbers. And Krishnamurti is again completely entered this conundrum and kind of cracked it in a beautiful way when he says, if there's change in the consciousness of one human being, it affects the consciousness of mankind. The numbers are not, it's not a numbers game of trying to get a large number of people to become followers of one religion, one idea, one product, one software, one app, or one particular mobile phone, computer, or whatever. It's not that. That if one person's consciousness, the individual's consciousness undergoes a change because the individual sees this clearly, it affects the consciousness of mankind. So, I don't know if I've covered the topic in a manner which makes sense. So, this is where I rest for a while. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to address them, not in a manner of being an expert, but as somebody who can share what he's understood. Somebody has a hand up there.
Sir, the last point you were making was quite impressive. But when you said that you don't have to extract, can I move with the perception without extracting anything, so that without part in extraction, would you throw some light on that?
Are you saying, I'm sorry.
Can you just repeat that?
I'm saying, sir, that extraction, without extracting anything out of that perception, you emphasized in the last part of that perception, and without extracting, making it an idea. So that without extracting anything, but my mind is used to extracting something out of it. So without, will that not make some problems?
So I use the word extracting, sir.
Yes,
Extraction. Okay. So how do, if I were to rephrase your question, and Silas, please help me with this, if I'm rephrasing it correctly. If I do not extract something from the perception, would that not create a problem? Is that your question?
My question is, sir, that without extracting, will it not make the self get involved with that? It's another kind of conflict I'm creating within myself. Without extracting anything out of a perception is also a kind of a goal, isn't it? Thank you.
Okay, so you are saying, are you making a rule out of not extracting something from a perception? Okay. No, I don't think I'm speaking from that location. I'm pointing to the fact that this is how our mind works. When we listen to somebody, when we observe something, we want to extract something from it. And therefore we move away from the thing that we are attending to at that moment. And therefore the question I was asking is it possible to observe something? Is it possible to listen to somebody holding in abeyance or without this movement of extraction? Not making something abstract out of it.
May I, sir, just the last point?
No, I think we can pass on the mic to others also. We can come back to you later if you wish.
Respected Gatwa sir, something just related with this is I wanted to ask. Krishnamurti ji also says that there is instant action in perception when you perceive something. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Okay, so I gave the example of, in a moment, understanding that my thinking is very much like the thinking of the person with whom I'm speaking or the group that I'm discussing with. What does that perception do to me? In a flash, I perceive it. Right? I see this. And Krishnamurti says perception is action. Now, what action emerges from this next moment? I go back to division. I go back to feeling that. So that perception doesn't seem to affect the next moment. So it is not this self-knowledge or understanding or seeing something. It's not something that carries on from one moment to the next moment to the next moment. It is a moment-to-moment process. In the moment when I see it, that perception means I don't experience division at that moment. But there's no guarantee that I carry forward that understanding to the next moment. The next moment is fresh. Is it happening? Is it not happening?
So this is the very last point you made about we have different consciousness. Other people, we think that we are different from others, and then you said we all have the same consciousness. I agree with it. And you said if something enters into my mind and consciousness, it affects the whole of mankind. Can you elaborate on that?
Sir, this is Krishnamurti's point, not my point. He says
because if it entered into his consciousness, but nothing must change the entire consciousness of mankind. Is it related to that, or is it something else you're trying to say?
Sorry, I couldn't.
If persons like Krishnamurti, something entered into their consciousness, they saw things differently. How is it that it did not affect the whole of mankind? Why am I not seeing it? Maybe it's a very vague question, I think.
See, I can't answer that question. I don't know what impact Krishnamurti has had. There are 300 people here, so many years after his dead and we are considering his teachings. And whether his work or his teachings have had an impact, whether the change in his consciousness has affected humanity, I don't know. You must consider that for yourself. But one thing that he pointed to, where he said that it is work for each individual. Each individual, are we concerned with the transformation of human consciousness? And he said that if there is a transformation of one individual's consciousness, it affects the consciousness of mankind. Because all mankind's consciousness is one. But that is how I understand.
Hello, sir. During your talk, there was one point which you made. There comes a point when we realize that emotionally, all of us are not very different. In a way, all of us carry the same sort of emotional baggage or emotional reactions. Then you put a question saying, in that case, would you talk to another?
What do we do?
Would you talk to the other person if you know that the emotional makeup is similar, more or less? Then you put a question saying, in that case, would you talk to the other person? I'm wondering what that means. Does it mean that there is nothing left to talk, or whatever we talk would be just short talk, or it will be just rehashing the past or something like that? Or does it have some other meaning? What is left to talk if we know that
It's a very interesting question you're asking. If I feel the other human being is just like me, what is there for me to share with the person? What is there to talk? What is there to exchange? Right?
Yeah. Whatever I talk, will it be just
Built into that is the statement that we talk only when we want to get something from the other person or we want to give something to the other person. Right?
Yeah.
Now let's say, suppose we were not there, then what would we do? So this is a very interesting question. How would we discuss? How would we talk to each other?
Yeah.
So much of the time, we don't know how to do this. In fact, the challenge in our schools is often like this. How do we discuss with the student? How do we discuss with colleagues? When we know that that person is deeply very much like yourself, has some prejudices, has some thoughts, has some convictions, has some religious beliefs, has fears. How do you communicate with each other?
Yes.
Do we communicate from the position of saying, I know better than you, therefore I will tell you?
Yeah, true.
Or do we create this asymmetry? How do we talk as equals is a very valuable, very important question.
The corollary of that is, do we shed all inhibition, all, a sense of self, or, me being different, and then talk very openly, considering him as ourselves? Or the meaning is that there is really nothing much left to talk, because it's a matter of give and take, just rehashing the old sort of similes.
Sir, if you don't mind my saying this, I think in grappling with this question, your mind is attempting to extract a formula out of it. And maybe we can watch that. Our minds do that. We want to extract something from it so that we can take it home and then chew on it. But maybe there is nothing to be extracted.
Okay, yeah, just plain watching. Okay.
Yes.
True. Thank you.
So I have a question. See, the war is going on between Ukraine and Russia for more than a year, and now between Hamas and Israel. Okay, you say that consciousness, or JK says one's consciousness is affecting the world or whatever it is. Why is it that the one consciousness is different from the other consciousness? On the other hand, you see the World Cup going on, and people will be absolutely thrilled or excited to know what's going to happen. Like that, this conundrum is going on. So what is our response? I am not able to understand. Why is the world not waking up? And some the Western bloc, some the Chinese or Russian bloc, why are we not as a collective consciousness of the governments of all over the countries not rising up to the occasion to try to resolve this?
I don't know, sir. I can only answer this in terms of my understanding, and I'm not sure this is directly connected to what Krishnamurti is saying. There is this parable of the 100th monkey. I don't know if you've heard that. And one person's consciousness, there have been enlightened souls through centuries, millennia in the world. And yet, human beings are butchering each other, as Krishnamurti says. That means that obviously there's a justification for this butchering. There's a rationale which seems to say that this is the way to end problems, this is the way to engage with problems. Mankind hasn't learned. It may be simpler for us to say, I have learned it, I will not do it. But let us watch closely. How do we interact when we come across a friend, a member of our family, our own child, our own spouse? When we have a disagreement, what do? We may not end up killing each other, but what do we do at that moment? Do we know how to talk to each other in such a way that there is no conflict, that there is no difference between the two? And the parable of the 100 monkeys says if certain number of monkeys in the Pacific Island, I believe one female monkey started breaking coconuts with or a shell with something. And then islands are all far away. But as soon as a few monkeys could do this, all the monkeys in all the islands started doing this. Maybe there are not enough monkeys who have turned their back on violence. By that I mean the human monkeys. So this is my view, and this is, I'm putting it there as my understanding, okay? I can't connect it directly to what Krishnamurti said.
Good morning to you all. Good morning to you all. I'm talking about myself. I'm living in a world which is changing. I'm living in a world which is divided. But I have to survive. Is there any way, other way to survive without changing the world, or no undivided way? Is there any way? That's my question.
Can you rephrase it for me? I'm not catching this one.
How do I live in a changing and divided world? What is my own approach? I need to survive.
Sir, do we need to survive or do we need to live? No, let me just enter into that question. So, survival already means that we are under threat. I need to earn my livelihood. Do I need to earn my livelihood if it meant harming some other people, producing some poisonous chemicals, polluting the air, polluting the water? Would I do it? I can always say, this is the only way I know how to survive. Krishnamurti in one place asks, what is wrong with being poor? If you love doing something, what's wrong with being poor? Is it a matter of survival or is it a matter of tradition that we want to continue with the level of comfort that we've already had? We want to continue with the style of life that we are used to. We want to continue with the tradition that each generation must have more than the previous generation. So, what are the connotations of survival that we carry that may kind of resolve this question in some way? I think food, shelter and clothing may not be so difficult to get, but all the other paraphernalia that goes with it does require a wholly different way of living altogether. And division. I'm invited to this meal all the time. I'm invited to the meal of wanting to belong to one party, one group, one religious entity or the other. How do I function in this milieu of invitations? Invitations, pressures, how I'm cajoled along into these channels. How do I function? That's a very interesting question. Do I divide myself by saying I'm separate from all of you? Or how do I interact with human beings who carry various elements of conditioning in their being? How do I interact with these human beings? So I wonder if the question of survival gives a certain connotation to it, but is it not in the moment of transaction, in the moment of listening, in the moment of engagement, that something can happen? I might catch that I am responding in a conditioned manner to what somebody is saying. Then will I be able to say to that person, hang on, I've just watched myself and I think this is coming from my own conditioning. Will I be able to be open with that person?
There is immediate perception to me when you're talking about the non-poisonous chemicals. Actually, that come into my mind that how it can be the poisonous chemicals and non-poisonous chemicals without opposite, created the opposite. Like the dopamine is secreted by the brain, is the positive or the non-poisonous chemical in the form of love or something else. But it is again might be the stupid abstraction of the scientific research. But the direct perception says that without opposite, the brain does not survive. The brain creates its own order by creating the contradiction. There is contradiction or the opposite between the chemical, poisonous chemical and non-poisonous chemical, and it creates the turmoil which is in the form of, you can say, the illusion or delusion. And that is the way of healing the brain, not the body. Body is different and brain is different. And that brain is the one that of the whole consciousness, human consciousness.
So you are a doctor, sir?
No, sir, no. I am not doctor. That's why I told you that I am not abstracting the thing which is a scientific research or the.
So we are talking like two lay people. I am also not a doctor. I am speaking about what I have seen and what I have read. That people, it has been recorded, it has been understood through research that feelings change the chemical compositions within the human personality. That different chemicals are released when we are afraid, certain chemicals are released. I am not calling them good, bad, or poisonous, non-poisonous. I don't know about whether they are poisonous or this is the body's response. That much I know. And when I wake up from sleep or when I am very peacefully sitting down with friends and family and where I am very secure, they say the body has a certain chemical picture and that they call homeostasis, which is very, very comfortable. The body is going on with its job. But suddenly these feelings, these stimuli come, or I notice something, or I have a memory of some bad experience I had, and the body's chemistry changes. That is all I am speaking about.
Hi, sir.
Yes, please.
You can
Yeah.
stand.
Okay. Sir,
Maybe you can raise it.
hi, sir. Hi, sir. Yeah. Okay. Sir, we have a leading mind which, when you are interacting with the life, when you are living it, when you see something profound clearly, you will learn something out of it. Is that learning is different from what we are discussing about extracting out of it? Is there any thin line in between them to see them? I am learning out of something after seeing it clearly. That learning is differentiates from the extracting what you are talking about. Isn't it part of that?
Sir, I sometimes think I see things very clearly. Am I aware of the assumptions on the basis of which I am saying this? Much of the conflict today seems to be because two people are seeing two different things clearly. A thinks he is very clear, B thinks he is very clear. So A feels he has to convince B, or B thinks he has to convince A. There is middle ground. A has to tolerate B and B has to tolerate A. Krishnamurti talks about tolerance, and tolerance is a bad word in his book. He said, what does this tolerance mean? So, are we willing to step down from this conviction and listening to another human being at all? I'm sure the people who built the Narmada Dam were very convinced that this is good for the country. I'm sure people who built the nuclear arsenals thought that this is wonderful, this is the right way to go about it. But what was the dialogue between people who did not think so? Was there a dialogue? Or was it a divided world? You have your way, I have my way. So that is how I can address your question. I don't have any better thing to say about it.
Na?
Yeah, please.
And you were telling us how even the simplest act of brushing our teeth can be looked at as, come to us as part of tradition. I'd like to extrapolate this a little bit and say maybe the way we cook and eat, dress up, or even study Pythagoras' theorem, Newton's laws, and even looking at, say, Kabir or K's understanding, whatever we see, all this looks like it has not, meaning I have not arrived at it. Somebody else has arrived at it. All I am trying to do is look at it, appreciate it. That's all, like somewhat like secondary knowledge to me, all of it. But my question is, if I am to arrive at the technology, the efficient way of brushing, say the simplest one, it would take me considerable amount of time and probably lifetime to even to arrive at Pythagoras' theorem. There's got to be a different way by which we, meaning it's not, I don't think it's a sensible thing to, try to arrive at everything on your own. My lifetime wouldn't be enough. So, would you like to say something about it?
How nicely you put that question. Do we have to reinvent the wheel at each turn? I gave an example about the toothbrush, and yes, it seems to have some meaning. So does it mean every single thing in my life I have to do the same thing with? And that seems already terrible. I feel miserable when I even think of all the Pythagoras theorem and all the knowledge that man has handed down. So I think what you're saying is absolutely true. It's not a question of reinventing the wheel completely. There are things we do which we do unquestioningly. It's a fact. And there are things we understand. Our understanding is usually partial about most things. How do we live with this knowledge that our understanding is limited? It is not to polish our life so that we are doing the best thing in every way, from brushing our teeth to every other thing. We don't know. We don't know. So I think a mind which is open to examining something which somebody brings up or somebody discusses is a mind which can drop and not feel insecure and not say, am I doing something wrong? That's why we start beginning to feel guilty, right? Oh my God, I'm not doing things properly. I mean, not going there. Can we talk about things that we are interested in discussing? Can we look at it? And if we understand that the human brain, the human mind, is often accepting things without questioning. Big problem today. You have so much of propaganda happening through the media. How will you know what's fact, what's not? That's right. So do we have a mind which is questioning? And do we think that's what we need to do? Or do we say, I have no choice, I'm powerless, I'm disempowered, I just go where the herd goes. I'll be swallowed up in the ocean of humanity. I am but one person in 8 billion people and I don't count. And Krishnamurti says, your consciousness, the way it functions, the individual's consciousness is very important. If you are able to see things well, I am able to see things accurately, clearly, factually, perceptually. That has an impact on the consciousness of mankind. You are not a discipline. If I were to interpret this, I would say, what he's saying is, don't treat yourself as a disempowered individual. please understand that your consciousness is the consciousness of mankind. And if there's a change there, it's very potent in some sense. But you can't follow all the methods that people have handed down to you to bring about this transmission of consciousness. Truth is a pathless land. Don't follow anybody. In fact, go so far as to say, never ask the question how to anybody. If you ask them, they'll tell you and you're finished.
Hi, this is Prasoon here. Hi, Dr. Sir. Yes. So, I think my question is on, you spoke about tolerance and I was thinking about it. For me to tolerate somebody else, so maybe it's more of a clarification. I felt that if I would feel, which I don't, that the world is me and I am the world, I might not have to tolerate anyone. But the fact that I do have to tolerate tells me I can see that the thinking is different. I can see the differences, and that for me definitely creates division. So my question is, would I really need to tolerate someone if I were to, let's say, resonate with them or feel that we are
Sir, I can only say this, that if I'm not tolerating the other human being, that means not feeling superior, not looking down my nose and saying, yeah, okay, you're a lesser mortal, I tolerate you, your view is different, I understand you're not developed enough. If I'm not doing that, and I see that his way of thinking is based on certain assumptions, his experience or her experience and the background, and I see that mine too is, if I don't tolerate, then I have to speak at that level. I have to engage at that level. It's far easier to step back and say, okay, this person doesn't understand. Let me not waste my time with this person. Okay, fine. I'm a civilized human being, so I will not punch him in the nose or anything of the kind or utter any bad words. But it's okay. I'll politely close the conversation. I'll disengage with a sense of tolerance.
In that sense, it is very much similar to reinventing the wheel every single time.
Very much similar to?
Reinventing the wheel every single time in every conversation.
Sir?
Yes, I did.
You talked about differences and division. Differences are very normal and common things to happen, whereas divisions create problems. So my question is that in your day-to-day dealing with people, you come across such incidences where you see that the differences which are very much there, there is no denying them, but now has reached to a point where it's creating a division, and in that moment maybe you are not always conscious, but maybe at the moment when it's happening and you are conscious at that moment, that consciousness making you see that difference is now taken up to a level of division. Now it creates some conflict within, and it creates a conflict with the other person as well. Now, how do you address such situations?
I see your question as one of working together, being together with other people. One person says, let's go to A for a holiday, and another one says B, and you're not able to resolve this. In a school setting, you find that you want to propose that things be done in a certain way. Everybody doesn't agree with this. There are some people who say, no, I don't think this is the right time to do this, I don't think this is the right way of doing it. Very rich conversations happen in our Krishnamurti schools. What do? Do we give up on each other, or do we exercise saying, no, I think this is very urgent, we have to decide, now you please keep your point of view quiet. 8 people have agreed, 2 don't agree, we make decisions by majority, is that what we do? So that is one strategy. The other strategy is we try and convince that other human being of our position. No, but that human being, if is sufficiently strong in their position, they will try to convince us of their position. Right? So is there a meeting ground without positions? Can we listen to each other and say, Baba, you have a position on this level. Can we look at how we work together? I mean, that's quite a challenge. I completely agree with you. And not dividing the house is, I think, a very, 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 very important thing in a place of work.
Changing the consciousness of mankind is a wrong concept.
So,
changing the mankind consciousness is a wrong concept, what they are telling. If I am right, in all my relationships you will be right. That is all. If I am right, in all my relationships things will be right. So that concept of changing man's consciousness is wrong. You have not followed, see? What they
I understood what you said, sir. But I think we must place it in the context in which Krishnamurti said it. When he said, if you know how rightly to relate to one human being, you know how to relate to all human mankind. Now, in a moment of clarity, in a moment of awareness, I may not have a fragmentation in my relationship. It doesn't mean the next moment is free of division or breaking. It is a moment-to-moment thing, and it's only the awareness which allows us this perception and this clarity. So it is not like you have found a method and therefore with that method I can say that all my relationships are fine. It doesn't mean that I won't have a quarrel with my daughter or my wife or my son.
No, I did not mean that. All my relationships, if I am right, that moment, all relationships will be good. If I am right, I am not bothered about changing mankind's consciousness. If I am right, then all relationships will be right. I am not coming to a conclusion.
I don't know, how do you know you are right, sir? Because I never know, because somebody can question me.
That is
That's a common.
That is okay.
Everybody thinks they are right. Otherwise they would not think, they don't have a point, they wouldn't think so.
Last thing, here everywhere, wherever I talk, I quote this. There is a beautiful song in Kannada, Kurigalu sir Kurigalu, sheep sir sheep. So when people ask me, are we different like this? I don't want to be a sheep, I live among the sheep. That's all of my answer. Not followed, see?
No, I could not follow what you said.
See, when people, how you are different from others, they say, no, how you are different. I don't want to be a sheep. I live among the sheep, I will not be a sheep.
Sheep? We can pass on I think we have time for just one or two questions more. We will have to stop after this. Yeah, a couple of questions more.
Thank you, first of all. Sir, the topic of the meet says that living in a changing and divided world. Isn't it saying the world is divided a generalization?
Sir, with whatever wisdom people had, they have given this title. If you think, apply your mind, find out for yourself if there is truth in it or not. We don't have to all immediately agree on it or vote on it. That is not the purpose, right? So you are asking, is there an assumption that the world is changed and divided in the perception? We are having seen such conflict, so much of division within the country, within the neighborhoods, between people who are living close together, in families, and you have it all across the globe, so many theatres, in the oceans, in the air, now it's gone to the space as well. And would you call this divided? Would you call this fragmented? Would you call it a violent world? I don't know what you would call it. But it seems to have meaning for me. I don't know what you would.
I understand there is a lot of division in the world, and it's in me as well. I totally accept it. But isn't it an absolute statement to say that world is divided?
Okay. Is propaganda natural? No, listen to me too. Is propaganda natural? From soap to religion, Krishnamurti says propaganda and all propaganda is false. Haven't human beings tried to convince everybody of various things, that this brand of soap is good, this brand of shampoo is good, this way of living is good, this religion is better than the other religion? What has changed? It has shifted to the internet, that's about it. You search for some meaning of some word and next day you will get 3 advertisements in your mailbox. Propaganda. What has changed? The means have changed. So, to say that change, technology, development is benign is to also shut our eyes to all the destruction it's causing. We don't have answers to this, but that doesn't mean it's benign. Yeah.
We have one more, maybe one last. You have a question? Oh, okay, one last, maybe last 2 questions. We'll have to stop after that, I think.
I just want to say that if each one of us just tries to resolve all the conflicts in our own mind, then what do we care about? Then what is happening in the outer world? We won't even see any conflict in the outer world. If we can just concentrate.
Let me see if I got you right. If I resolve all my conflicts in my head, then why should I be concerned with what's happening outside? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I won't be. That's what I feel.
Sorry?
I feel I won't be once I've resolved all conflicts of my own in my own mind.
So, but my conflicts are often with my neighbor, with my daughter, with my son.
Whatever they may be.
So, yes. So, from moment to moment, how do I relate to people around me? Krishnamurti also says life is relationship. How do I relate to the things around me which I don't agree with, which I see as false? The pollution in Delhi hitting all kinds of levels. You were there, in the middle of that. So, speaking from a position of saying, what will happen if I resolve all my conflicts? I don't know. We don't know that.
We'll have one more question and then we'll have to stop off.
Hello, my question is, so you mentioned that we don't differentiate between what is going on in the movies or in series and all that and the actual violence, but some of us do that. Now my question actually is, there is no Netflix which is against our sleep, okay? Then all these AI is coming up and all of us, so we have become the products and we are the product of conditioning and all of that. Now, how do we really stand alone as cases and deal with all this? Not being influenced and yet sanely live in these crazy times, divided times.
Some of us see the distinction between these two, you said.
Yes.
And then, therefore, what's the question? How do we live in a world where these things are all getting mixed up?
Everything is getting mixed up and we are in the marketplace and our smartphones have made us products. So whatever I click, whatever I search is sold behind, right? So I am sold, actually, totally. So I am totally conditioned. Media and the social media and everything is influencing me. So how do we live sanely? Now there is Netflix, there is entertainment, everything is happening. So that's the challenge.
That's a wonderful question. So you are asking, how do I in my life know how to live in such a way that I am not getting influenced or trying to influence another? How do I do this? How do I listen to what's coming my way? How do I read what's coming in my mailbox? How do I read the visuals which are speaking to my unconscious? The visuals are all very deeply researched and done by psychologists who know how to produce the visuals in such a way that it talks to your mind without your logical faculty ever being able to have access. This is happening. So, in a sense, what does it mean to have a mind which is open and yet at the same time awake to the influences and not getting influenced? Probably this is the challenge of our times now. If we don't have that, we are straws in the wind, we are sitting ducks, we are numbers to be, treated the way market wants to treat us.
I think we'll stop now. Thank you very much, Gautama. I think you have raised many questions for us to consider. We will take them forward in the coming few days. We will close this session now. Please proceed and have your tea, coffee, whatever.